C.C. Bryant, who is the head of the NAACP in Macomb, reads in Jet magazine that AMSI is planning this voter registration project with SNCC, and writes a letter asking for some voter registration workers to come to Macomb. So I'm the voter registration workers, right? So AMSI trundles me on a bus down to Macomb, and so we actually start the voter registration in southwest Mississippi, not in the Delta. So this is now the summer of '61, July, and I hit.
You lived with C.C. Bryant.
I was living. Well, when I come in, C.C. takes me in, and I'm living in his house. He has two children. His oldest daughter is away at college, and his youngest son is a high school student. But I have the daughter's bedroom, and I'm taken into the family. And we start out by Owens, we call him Super Cool Daddy, but I'm trying to think of his first name. Owens comes by every morning. He's the treasurer of the NAACP group. He's a retired railroad worker, and he has a fisheye. He has one eyelid that he has to prop up, right? So he wears these special glasses, and he carries his cane. He has a very tense look, but people trust him with the money, right? Because obviously you can't have a bank account for this money, right? And so every morning he comes in a local taxi, and he drives me around, and we talk, he and I, with individuals who are small businesses, right, in the black community. So they're doing tailoring work, they're running a little restaurant, right, they're carpenters, right, running the gas station, right. And we're explaining to them that we want to set up this voter registration project and bring in 2 SNCC workers for a month. And we want to raise money to house and feed them for a month. And when we raise that money, we'll bring them in. And we're collecting $5 and $10 bills. And Owen is, keeping the account, right? And it takes us 2 weeks to get this money together. On Sundays, we're talking to churches and so forth. So we get the money together and open up the drive. 2 people come down. Reggie Robinson comes and works in Macomb, and John Hardy comes and works in Walthall County, the adjacent county out. And we start this work, and we're taking people down in Pike County, where Macomb is, first, and begins to get some press, local press. And so 2 people, 2 sisters, they actually still live, Mrs. Scobie and her younger sister and her brother, a younger brother who has actually passed, come from Amite County over and say they want to go down to Liberty to register in Amite County. And they live close to the Pike County line, but they live in Amite County, right? But so they naturally come over to Pike County for NAACP stuff. So we agree. So now, when I take them down, I'm not getting any physical opposition in Pike County, but when we take them down into Amite County, the Highway Patrol parks outside of the courthouse, and it takes them each one a couple of hours to go through the form and everything. So there are 3 of them. So we're there pretty much all day. And then he follows us out of town. I'm sitting in the back seat, and the brother's driving, and stops us when we cross the county line back into Pike County. And so I get out and ask him what's wrong, and so I end up getting arrested. Right? So this is my first time, and when I get to the jailhouse, I asked to make a collect call, because I've been told by SNCC that if they arrest you for this voter registration, you call John Doerr at the Justice Department, and you can call him collect. So I did. I called him collect, right? And so he actually was there, and he picked up the phone, right? And I explained to him what happened. So he said, "Let me speak to that person." So he talks to this person. And so when they hang up, they say, "Well, we're dropping the charges, but you have to pay cost of court." So I said, "No, I'm not. Well, for what? Why do I have to pay anything?" So I didn't. So they put me in jail overnight, and then the NACP came down a couple of days later and got me out. The first line of defense, I think, was the Highway Patrol. Arrest these people, put them in jail. Now, what that turned up was there's some level of federal protection or federal interference, however you want to look at it, right? So that isn't going to work. So after that, I went out. Cece took me out to Steptoes, introduced me to Steptoes, and we began. I stayed at Steptoes Farmhouse, and we began working out there to get some people to go down to register at Liberty. So the next two people was a couple of weeks later before we got a couple of people who were willing to go. So at that point, we meet with actual physical violence. I mean, it's like the patrol people disappear, and the local young people, the Rough 'em Up group comes, and so I'm attacked walking in the street towards the courthouse with these two people. Right.
What do you mean attacked?
There are three young white men, right, white guys, who come up and start to beat on me. So one of them really is beating on me. I go into a crouch, and at some point he stops, and I get up and keep on walking, right? And I think what happens is one of the people who are with me talks to him, right? And he stops, but I'm not aware of what's going on while the action is happening. I just know he stopped, and when he stops, I get up and go on walking. It's kind of surreal because there's a funeral procession happening in the town, and so while all this is happening, there's this funeral procession driving down the main street of this one-street town. And at the bottom, right before the street where the courthouse is, and the courthouse is sitting up a little on the left, there's a highway patrol person directing traffic. So when we approach him, I turn around, I tell him, that there's some people back there who attacked us. Right? So he doesn't say anything, and we go on to the courthouse. I've got a bloody shirt, right? And so the registrar comes to the front door, takes and looks at us and locks it, right? Closes it and locks it, and so we leave, right? So I call Justice Department people, and but before, actually what happens, we leave and we go back to Steptoes, right? And Steptoe has a young son, Charlie, who's maybe 12, 13, and so he's poking around in my head, and so he uncovers these gashes, right? And so we go from there back, and Dr. Anderson, who's living in Jackson now, and who was a young doctor who had just gotten out of medical school and taken the job in Macomb, sews me up, right? And he takes 8 stitches in a couple of places in my head, right? So
you hadn't realized how seriously you had been injured up
right,
to that point? I mean,
right.
with the blood soaking and
Right.
all
It's interesting, but because I didn't I didn't feel like, when I got back up, I didn't feel nauseous, you know, or whatever, right? And so it's like, you know, it's like the object is the courthouse, right? It's the courthouse which is the perimeter, which has to be defended against, right? So from the point of view of the white authorities, right? So what I came to think later is, well, the first line of defense is the police action, right? Then the next line is some kind of physical violence. And then the third line turned out to be murder. You know, they actually murdered one of the local farmers who was working with us, right?
Herbert Lee.
Herbert Lee, right.
And you had been working with him. I mean, he...
Right. Well, Herbert Lee was part of the network, the Steptoes NACP network, right? But just trying to, we're asking about violence, right? And so I think the violence comes in degrees and is targeted. And part of it is political violence, right? It's legal violence, right? You're going to act on a legal front in a way which is violating the law, really, right? And if that doesn't work, then you move, you know, through your different stages, right?